This thing that we call God, we know its character is more childlike than anything else. I mean, it claims that it's a jealous, vengeful God. I mean, if you're God, what do you got to be jealous of? And if you're God, a God of love, why do you have vengeance? What pissed you off? I mean, humanity has been a victim in this. I think we're dealing with beings that are not so much higher intelligence because they have tempers. They certainly don't have any problem killing us. Something's wrong here. That can't be the epitome of higher intelligence.
I'm not a fan of God.
I'm not a fan of Yahweh.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of all the deities.
I'm right there with you. But I never did the background check, Judith. I never checked its credentials. And what I found myself coming out of was that, and I found that in virtually every church I ever visited and seen it, and it's just weird, that this God loved the smell of burnt flesh.
Yeah.
You want to talk about occultism, there it is.
Just so yeah.
Someone on the pastoral staff was having sex with somebody else's husband or somebody else's wife. And I found that in virtually every church I ever visited and seen it, and it's just weird. It puzzles me that this God loved the smell of burnt flesh.
Yeah.
We have a president that is hell-bent on sacrificing humans. Yeah. And I got to ask myself, who's driving this? To me, this is evil. It's unnecessary, doesn't need to happen, should never happen. But yet it seems like everyone's focusing in the power structure to make it happen. That's evil to me. I don't know why another human would ever contemplate that, these gods that we've believed in and that, people sacrifice their lives to, they're not who they say they are.
Yeah. I think there is a lot of Baal worship here. People are willing to sacrifice their sons to the war god.
All right, everybody, welcome to this discussion on Christian hypocrisy. Christianity Today posted an article on their website called, "Are Christians Really Hypocrites?" This article made these remarks. Barna surveyed 718 self-identified Christians from a variety of denominations to find what extent their actions and attitudes line up with Jesus's. Researchers found only 1 in 7 of Christians manages to hold Christ-like beliefs and also act in Christ-like ways. Imagine that. This is a major Christian publication here now, just 10 years ago, admitting that the whopping bulk of the Christians they interviewed were hypocrites. Only 1 in 7 actually held Christ-like beliefs and acted in Christ-like ways. Yet, 1 in 2 Christians tended to have attitudes and actions that are characterized by self-righteousness. So now it's saying here that half of the Christians had a self-righteous attitude. If the religion that Jesus supposedly started, called Christianity, really had something to offer to the world, it wouldn't have such incredibly shameful statistics like this now, would it? Time and time again with things like this, we see the very opposite. Christianity is a miserably failure religion. Always has been. It's a miserable failure. Its entire history will back that up. The whopping bulk of the Christian world are a bunch of hateful, judgmental, finger-pointing, frickin' hypocritical scoundrels. Church is full of hypocrites. Why do you think church attendance has been dropping steadily for years now? A lot of churches have been closing some of their branches, right? And consolidating them into one larger church. There are less people attending. And that's a good thing, isn't it? Young adults in particular are rejecting the institution, the church, and Christianity in general. Christianity is abominable on so many levels. Number one, there's a great many priests and ministers out there who are closet gays. And yet there they are. Some of the most hypocritical finger pointers are actually themselves guilty of the very thing that they're pointing a finger at other people for. Did you know that? Especially in Christian circles. Yeah. They point a finger of condemnation at others for the very thing that they're guilty of, so that it makes them feel better about themselves and won't draw attention to themselves, but will in fact draw attention away from themselves as, being guilty of that very thing, right? It's to try to make themselves look good, feel better about themselves, and get others to feel better about themselves, when in fact, again, behind closed doors, it's another story. So yes, these are the reasons young people are turning away from churches today. Their hypocrisy, And when Christians condemn homosexuality, very often they're condemning homosexuals themselves, individual people, right? As though they're evil, vile. And then, again, not all Christians do this, but, an alarming number of them do. They'll say that it's a choice and, you made yourself that way. Oh, no. No, it's not a choice. It's not a choice. I've known a lot of gay people over the years, and it's not a choice, okay? And it's not something they did to themselves. A lot of people, not all, but a lot of gay people are gay because they were abused. Their father was abusive to them, and it just messes you up psychologically, right? I knew a gay guy, really sad story. He went to counseling to try to, deal with his homosexuality. He never accepted it himself. He was glad that other people had accepted it. He wasn't persecuted about it anymore. But internally, he never could fully come to grips with it. And he was actually in love with a woman, but he wasn't physically attracted to her. He wanted to spend his life with her. He totally loved her. But sexually, he just could not, he didn't want to get married to her because he knew it would, and she knew that, by the way. She knew he was gay. She didn't even care that he wasn't attracted to her physically. But in his mind, he couldn't grapple with it, He felt guilty with the concept of marrying her, knowing that he couldn't give her his all, in the bedroom. And even though she didn't have a problem with it, he did. You know what I'm saying? This was his internal conflict. And yet, in the eyes of most Christians, he would still come under the same condemnation as the gay community that likes to wear G-strings and parades down Main Street. Sorry, they're not the same. They're not the same. And they should not be labeled under the same banner. But that's how most Christians are, right? They're little judgmental finger pointing. Oh, I can't stand them. Absolutely can't stand them. Anyway, so yeah, these are the main reasons that this poll found why people are rejecting Christianity, rejecting going to church. The church is too hypocritical, too anti-gay, too anti-political, anti-gay in a wrong way, anti-person, really, anti-gay person. Most child molesters, religious, often target church members. Did you catch that? The conclusion of this article is that most child molesters are religious and often target, kids that are members of their own church. The article said, it's not unusual for hardcore child molesters with more sexual offense convictions, more victims and younger victims to be well-respected members of Christian congregations and to be actively involved as church leaders.
Someone on the pastoral staff was having sex with somebody else's husband or somebody else's wife. And I found that in virtually every church I ever visited and seen it, and it's just weird. It puzzles me. Yeah. And I got to ask myself, who's driving this? To me, this is evil. And I got to ask myself, who's driving this? To me, this is evil. It's unnecessary, doesn't need to happen, should never happen. But yet it seems like everyone's focusing in the power structure to make it happen. That's evil to me.
There is a lot of Baal worship here. People are willing to sacrifice their son.
So there you go, guys. Christian institutions, Christian publications have admitted this again and again, that there are big problems in the Christian church, outrageous hypocrisy, and that, as this article pointed out, very often, some of the worst child offenders are actually in church and very active in their church. Wow. Everyone's heard the horrific stories of, Catholic priests molesting kids in the back room of the church, right? How this has gone on a grand scale. But this problem goes on in Protestant churches as well. It's not just the Catholic Church. It's bigger in the Catholic Church, but one of the reasons for that is the Catholic Church itself is so much bigger. So naturally, proportionately, you're going to have more offenses like that in the Catholic Church. But that doesn't mean that proportionately it's worse in the Catholic. Well, it might actually be proportionately worse simply because in Catholicism, you have the celibacy, right? Celibacy dogma, where priests aren't allowed to get married. And so, yeah, it probably proportionately is also worse, not just numerically. But nevertheless, guys, it is a big problem in Protestant churches, too. They often like to point a finger at the Catholic Church for its sexual scandals, but a lot of times that's just to take the heat off themselves, right? In that classic hypocritical fashion. You not only have individuals who play that game, right? They'll condemn others for things they're guilty of, but whole churches do it, too. Protestant churches love to condemn the Catholic Church for its crimes, its sins, and the same thing goes on in their midst as well. None of them, absolutely none of them, are squeaky clean or clean at all. And it's because of the very nature of the Christian religion, right, that you have these problems. It's a lead weight, not a lifeline. On January 7th, 2015, the Reverb Press website reported in an article called Jim Bob Duggar, Molestation is Common in Christian Families. It stated, Jim Bob Duggar made a statement to Fox that seems to prove just how dangerous sexually repressive Christian doctrine is to children and to teens. This is the guy who had the reality show. Well, his whole family had that reality show several years back. The Duggar family. I'm trying to think. Was it 19 and Counting? I think it was called. Anyway, this interview was in wake of a big scandal that blew open, and it brought that whole show to an end, where it was discovered that one of this guy's sons had been molesting one of his younger sisters. I guess it was going on for quite a few years. And this was, a very conservative Christian family, and it was such a shock to their nationwide audience, to the religious world in general, right? But it shouldn't be shocking, guys. This is the norm. It's not the exception. I saw it myself many times. I think of this one family in particular I was pretty close with back when I was a Bible dupe. And very conservative, strictly religious family, never missed a day in church, and did, what were called Vespers or family worship, every night before bed, blah, 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 blah. And yet, one by one, when the kids turned 18, the son got into drugs. One of the daughters was pregnant. They just went completely off the deep end. And why? Just because of what Mr. Duggar had just said here. Christianity as a whole is so repressive, and they don't give any freedom to kids. It's great to teach your kids good, strong moral values, right? Not only great, you better do it. But once you teach them, when they're young, you've got to give them freedom to go out and, go places with their friends. You don't have to look over their shoulder every 2 minutes. If you instill those morals the right way, they're going to have mature thinking minds, or maybe not mature if they're underage, but you know what I'm saying. They're going to be equipped to handle, tempting situations in a more mature way. Let's put it that way, right? And even if they don't, that can be fixed, but you're going to drive them to be much more likely to want to violate those moral standards you instilled in them. You're going to actually encourage them to want to violate those standards if you've been too strict with them and didn't give them any freedom. And so that's what Duggar was talking about here. This story is extra sad, though, because it turns out that they made light of the whole thing. Because as Christians, they're taught to forgive, so they forgave the son. I'm not saying they shouldn't forgive him, but there was no consequence. They just moved on like, business as usual. Oh, no, there's got to be some consequence here. A horrible behavior like that's traumatized that girl. She'll probably never be the same again. It'll mess her up the rest of her life, right? But in the Christian context, oh, no, God forgave him, and we're just gonna, move on, and... Anyway, the article went on to say, as Jim Bob Duggar spoke while his subservient wife stayed quiet. Again, that's another toxic situation there in the Christian world, right? Wives are taught to be silent. Let the husband do the talking. You're just a woman, Oh, my God, is it horrible, this frickin' horrible religion called Christianity. Anyway, as she stayed quiet, it says... he claimed that child molestation is common in Christian families, of course, especially the families that he sought advice from in the wake of learning that Josh molested his own sisters while they slept. Oh, okay, I guess it was more than one. Sisters. Wow, I thought it was just one. But check this out. What this is saying here is that in the process of him talking with other families in his church, to get advice on how to handle this situation, he discovered that those families had the same things happen. Wow. You know what, guys? Not only does Christianity not serve as a barrier against stuff like this, it encourages it. This happens more within Christian homes than outside non-Christian homes. Anyway, this article went on to quote Duggar as saying, it was a very difficult situation, but as we talked to other Christian parents and different ones since then, a lot of families said that they have had similar things that happened in their families. A lot of families. He's talking about families.